Today is iPhone day. Not this iPhone. This is an iPhone 4 from 2010. A couple of weeks ago, I was kayaking in Chincoteague. Just as Hurricane Henry was coming in, I was attacked by a swamp fly and I dropped my phone in a swamp. Currently, I've been using this iPhone 4 as a stopgap because the new iPhones are coming out. One of the main things I'm interested in is checking out the video quality. Here on the iPhone 4, it's a bit shaky and the colors aren't great, and you can see the windows blown out in the background there. And then the upgrade to the iPhone 13 Pro is going to be a huge jump in technology, and I'm very excited about the camera. I'm going to take the new iPhone 13 Pro and we're going to check out a music festival, see how it performs. Joining me on this journey is going to be my new GoPro 10. The last one I had was a Hero 3. So this upgrade to the GoPro 10 I think is going to be great for the stabilization and also for the video quality. The only iPhone 13 Pro with a 1TB storage that was available in all of New York, because hey, we're going to be shooting all of that ProRes footage, was apparently in the new Apple store that's opening up in the Bronx today. All the way to the end of the line, and then I've got to get a bus, which is going to be a bit tricky. Woo! All right, let's hit the subway. Got my hat, mask, GoPro, clear bag for getting into the festival. I haven't been using the iPhone 4 to shoot video on up until now, so I'm suddenly struck by how limited the camera is. It's equivalent to a 30mm lens, which is not a bad field of view to be fixed at, but I'm used to being able to zoom in and out on my previous iPhone XS, so already this is starting to feel claustrophobic. A lot of the networks in New York are 4 and 5G now, and even though this is a 3G phone, a lot of those networks have been switched off. So it's only really running on 2G, which gives me phone calls and text messages, but the email on this thing barely works, and pretty much all of the apps won't load. It doesn't help that the New York subway windows are absolutely filthy, but the camera's not hugely responsive with focus and exposure adjustments. As we head up through the Bronx here, notice that there's no HDR and it's really struggling with high contrast. So we've got poor mapping of exposure zones between sky and shade, and the rolling shutter is going like crazy. There's no stabilization and there's a lot of warping on verticals as the camera moves horizontally. Alright, now I'm stuck. Because I don't have a phone that can load maps or any sort of web browser, I've asked a lovely lady who gave me all the right information about which bus to get, but she failed to say that I was actually standing at the wrong bus stop. So after 20 minutes of buses going by, I then asked an MTA employee who got me on the right bus, and he noticed that even his bus had the wrong sign on it. So how's anyone meant to do this? Transitioning from indoors to outdoors has an exposure lag. Let's try a lateral tracking shot to reveal the shopping mall. Now, I'm doing my best ninja walk here, but it's still very shaky. And here we are at the Apple Store. It's opening day and people are lining up because they're still socially distancing. I'm going to try 2 establishing shots here. First one with my iPhone, hopefully we can be done with this soon. And then the second one's with the GoPro, stark contrast with 4K resolution and amazing stabilization. I'm a couple of hours late, so I still have to line up to get into the Apple Store. So because the iPhone 4 is basically unusable, I've become very aware over the last month of how many times I'll pull out my phone as a distraction during downtime, such as now when I'm waiting in line. It's forced me to be more present with the environment around me, and although I can't say I've garnered much of an epiphany, I do hope to pay less attention to my new phone, treating it like a tool and switching off notifications. This one's been a pain.
I would imagine, man. I don't know how you did it. They're done with a machine. These ones. Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's certainly heavier.
Key is turning it on so you can see where it lines up.
Thank you. Hello. Even though I have big hands, I decided not to get the Pro Max because the Pro does everything that the Max does, and it's easier to handle and carry, and therefore easier to film with. Now that the iPhone's set up, let's try that establishing shot of the Apple Store one last time. The iPhone 13 Pro is infinitely smoother than the iPhone 4, as expected, and it's comparable to the GoPro 10's stabilization. Here they are side by side, just for comparison. Now walking through the mall, you can see already it's much smoother. Trying that lateral tracking shot of the mall again, it is so smooth on the iPhone 13 Pro, I don't even need to get my ninja walk on. I got so lost last time with the bus that this time I'm just going to call a Lyft to go from the Bronx to Queens for the Governor's Ball at Citi Field. The iPhone is smoothly morphing the zoom between the 3x lens all the way to the wide-angle lens. A ton of stabilization is going on here, and there's not too bad of a warp effect. Focusing in cinematic mode is problematic though. It just won't hold my manual focus to the rear view mirror, and it keeps jumping to the chair in the foreground. I can switch between cinematic mode on and off here in post-production, and you'll see the depth that it's identifying. Now let's take a closer look at cinematic mode. At the top left is the original 1080p video with full field of view, and at the top right is the version that has had the depth of field rendered in. At the bottom you can see the iPhone 13 Pro's AI tracking. It's nuts. It's just manic. The AI does a fantastic job of identifying not just faces, but bodies and inanimate objects, such as the balloons. But here we come to the main con that I can see with the current implementation of cinematic mode that's just frustrating me the most. The autofocus is way too jumpy. Plus, when you try to pick a manual focus point, it doesn't stick. It's like Apple says, nope, you can't be trusted to make decisions, back to auto for you. While you can technically adjust the focus point in post-production, for the bulk of what this will be used for, i.e. quick videos to social media, nobody has time for that. There are also a few times when cinematic mode crashed, and where the file failed to save, so it's possible that screen recording while using cinematic mode is just too taxing for the iPhone 13 Pro. I'll explain a bit more about focus locking in a second, but for now, the second con that I see is ghosting, which has been well documented with the iPhone 12 before it, and this is particularly obvious in low light when shooting into a light source, such as the gov ball text seen here. And now let's talk about the pros. Firstly, the nice thing about being tall is that any spot in a crowded music festival is great. The 3x optical lens is usable, but I wouldn't use the 9x digital zoom in production work. Now the two big obvious wins over the iPhone 4 are exposure and stabilization. The 3 cameras handle the exposure compensation really well between the highlights and the shadows, and the stabilization is so good that I'll be able to forego a gimbal for the majority of what I shoot. Take a look at these two subway shots between the 4 and the 13. It's so easy to become accustomed to better footage, such that you just forget how much processing is going on in the background just by default. Now lastly, back to the focus locking. What's confusing is that if you tap to focus, the camera displays this focus lock label, but if you move a bit, it'll jump back to autofocus. This isn't new to iPhone 13, but it's new to me, which is if you want to manually focus, what you need to do is long press for a second to actually lock the focus. Now when you move around, the focus will actually remain in place. It'll enable you to do shallow depth of field tracking shots like this one without the focus jumping around. However, I still feel like the focus tracking is a bit finicky. I'd like to see the user input followed more faithfully. So that's my first look at the iPhone 13 Pro. Side by side between the iPhone 4 of 10 years ago and the iPhone 13 of today, you can see just how far the footage has come in smartphone technology. There's a ton of advancements with stabilization, exposure, and resolution, which makes putting all of this computational photography into your pocket such a fantastic tool for vlogging on the go. I think the cinematic mode is going to be great for getting some bokeh effects onto social media quickly. And even in professional environments, I'm sure there's going to be times where the 4K HDR footage will be able to be supplemented in for traditional cameras. Funnily enough, the smallest part of the kit that I'm shooting with right here is actually the phone itself, because I just grabbed the first tripod that I could coming out of the office. And for audio, I'm using this Zoom H6 recorder with a lapel microphone going into there, so that is not portable, and I'll need to find an easier way to get audio into the camera quickly. So let me know in the comments below, what are you shooting with your smartphone? What sort of content do you make? And is the quality of the smartphone that you're using good enough to make the content that you want, or would you consider upgrading? Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video.